The first bill that we are going to hear is 5079, an act relating to education. And this act would allow school districts to request or accept donations from a student on the student or the student's parent or legal guardian in whole or in part for the cost of a district-sponsored field trip, provided that the district pay the cost to meet any deficit that may remain in effect due to after the fundraising has concluded. Ladies and gentlemen, this legislation is due in part to a situation that, bless you, that occurred last year where school systems were canceling their field trips because there wasn't clarity on this issue. The important aspect of the legislation is no student shall be required or discriminated against because they don't have someone that made a contribution, and we'll go from there. Bill, you worked on this. This is actually probably the third version of this bill. Mr. Connell, would you like to add anything to that?
We have received some testimony from both sides, along the lines of last year. The ACLU does support this. There is a provision in here that when it comes to the funding, the schools have to they can set a goal to be met for the fundraising before they have to go forward with the project. So for example, there was a bus trip and you need $5,000 to justify it. You can say, we got to get $2,500 before we can push the trip on. Some people found that problematic, but most people realized that was a compromise we needed to make with, to help out the districts.
Right. So the ACLU has a letter in support, and Tim Duffy, the Rhode Island Association of School Committees do, and the East Greenwich School, 2 members of the East Greenwich School Committee do not like it. And the Department of Education, Andy Andrade, has signed in support. Are there any? Yes, Representative Kislyak.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to thank you for your leadership in introducing this bill. I think it's really important for families and kids in schools to be able to have field trips, which really increase educational opportunities and experiences for the children. I have children who got caught up in the confusion around the change or not change, the clarification of policy, and I think that this legislation will clear it up so that everybody can fairly and equitably go on educational field trips, and so I wanted to thank you. I strongly support this.
And could the record reflect that Representative Giraldo has joined us? And without objection, Representative, would you like to be listed in the affirmative on the vote to hold for further study?
I would, yes, please.
Okay, so moved. So at this time, Mr. Andy Andrade.
Chairman, can I make a comment before? Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. Representative Caldwell.
Do you want us to wave at you, or do you want us to raise our hand? Like in the thing?
No, right now, you can make your comment now, Representative.
Yeah, just in the future, do you want us to raise our hands through the chat, or do you want us to kind of like wave at you?
I think waving works better because the chat doesn't always come up on the screen that I have.
I just wanted to say also thank you. We worked on this bill a little together last year, so I wanted to thank you for reintroducing it and just clarify that I believe the East Greenwich School Committee supports the concept and the intent, and they just had a few issues with the bill as it was written, similar to last year. that, they'd be happy to talk about, and I can talk about with them too as we move on, because this is a really important issue, because hopefully soon our kids will be back in school and going on field trips. That can be something for us all to look forward to. So thank you.
Any other questions?
Chair, if I may, that was the big issue the East Greenwich School, the people who wrote to us had, was the idea if they could set a fundraising limit. That was something
That was the issue?
that was one of the main issues, yes.
So, and just to clarify the debate, a superintendent of one of the second, but now probably the third largest districts, stipulated that there may be field trips. They wanted to be able to set a benchmark, a goal, so that if they had to pick up the expenses, they could, budget for it, be realistic. So they expect individuals schools to raise money, and that was part of the debate that we had last year. But is Mr. Andrade on?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome,
Okay.
Mr. Andrade.
Thank you,
Please
sir.
proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, RIDE supports this legislation, and if you remember, Chairman, we worked very closely with you and other stakeholders last year to provide the clear guidance to school districts on field trips. First, I think an important point, the Commissioner firmly believes that field trips can enhance, the learning opportunities for students. We want as many students as possible to access engaging extracurricular experiences. Our top priority in putting guidance in place is to ensure that students have equal access to these opportunities, and that no family can be singled out or shamed because of inability to pay for a field trip for their son or daughter. We support this bill's desire to codify that fundraising is allowable, provided that the protections that you have in the bill, Mr. Chairman, are in place. The bottom line, our position is that districts can fundraise for field trips so long as individual students don't have mandated fundraising targets that must be met as a condition for participation. So again, this was a compromise, working with a lot of stakeholders last year. I think the bill as crafted is a good bill, and we support it wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Andrade? Thank you very much. And probably last year, one of the best letters we got in support of this, and without objection, could Representative Norrie be listed as present and affirmative representative?
Yes,
Norrie,
please, Chairman, thank you.
on the vote to hold, was from Robert Corrente. And he wrote a letter saying when he was a junior in high school, his English teacher, and he kind of paraphrased it, dragged him to this theater, this show, and he said he fell in love with it. And if it wasn't for that field trip and that exposure to Trinity Rep, he would not have had the career that he's had. And I know that, for myself as well, and public schools and high school, the field trips that we went on were wonderful and certainly added to the quality of the education and the whole experience. And Representative Amore has also joined us. Representative Amore, welcome. Would you like, could he be marked in the present and also in the affirmative for the vote to hold, Representative Amore?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this bill? Yes, Representative Azate.
I just remember, when I think about field trips, I remember we had a field trip to come here to the State House when I was in elementary school. And I often think about things like this because people in my community don't know that they can come here and have a tour. And so, we drive by the State House however often we do. We see it from the highway, we see it from the streets when we come to the mall, and don't realize that, this is a great field trip to come to.
Oh, yeah.
And, so that's something that I think about, especially when I first was elected and came in, was just remembering, like, I used to come here as a kid for, field trips. My parents, being first generation, didn't realize that you can just come here and do a tour. And so, I'm very grateful for field trips, for giving kids in my community, myself, public school kids, the opportunity to come to the State House as part of, just our school curriculum. So I'm all for field trips.
Excellent.
All the
Thank
time.
you very much. Yes, Representative Norrie.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to add to that as well, as a PTA treasurer, we have discussed this bill and the importance of this bill. Knowing, again, bringing 2 years ago, my children's school's 5th grade class here for a field trip. It was a great experience for them, and I just want to add that I received a call this morning from one of my local school committee members thanking me for sponsoring this bill and really appreciating this bill going forward. So thank you.
Very good. Let's see. Could the Representative Barrows, would you like to be listed in the affirmative for the vote and also present? Mr. Vice Chair? Okay, without objection. Thank you. The next bill, okay, are there any further questions? That concludes the hearing on 5079.